Alright, this is going to be a quick update on all the most recent numbers for the Dixie Fire, including acreage burned and structures destroyed, and then we're also going to take a really deep dive into the fire weather forecast to see what kind of conditions we can expect over the next few days. Quick summary of that fire weather forecast. We have some hotter, drier conditions coming in, which will pose a challenge to the Dixie Fire as temperatures get up into the high 90s with relative humidity in the low teens to single digits. But the good news is that there is weaker winds than we've seen over the past, just some gusts up to 10 to 15 miles per hour versus those 35 mile per hour gusts when the red flag was over the region. Now, the big question mark in the forecast ahead is there's also the possibility for some thunderstorms on Thursday and Friday, so we'll take a close look at how those thunderstorms may impact the Dixie Fire moving forward. Just looking at the satellite imagery though, you can see that right now we have much more smoke over Northern California than we have had in the past, and this actually could be some good news when it comes to the Dixie Fire. Again, there's two sides to every coin, especially when it comes to smoke. It can be bad news for air quality and the ability to use aircraft, but it's good news because that will hopefully moderate some of our fire weather conditions throughout the day today. There was one day in the past where we were expected to have a high temperature of 92 degrees and the smoke was so thick that our high was only about 72 degrees. So hoping for that moderating effect throughout the day because of that smoke, and we certainly will need that as temperatures are forecasted to be up in the mid to high 90s with very dry conditions as well. So if we actually want to take a look at the Dixie Fire, you can see where the hotspots have been recently, mostly on the northern and northeastern sections of this fire, and that's been mostly due to the fact that we've had southwesterly winds in the afternoons that have acted to push that fire further to the northeast. Now, if we zoom in here, you can see where a lot of those hotspots were yesterday. We had a large pyrocumulus cloud popping up right on this northeastern section, and you can see the hotspots even better on this map where we had numerous areas of this fire that had active behavior yesterday. We had the western edge right here, northern edge up here, but especially that northeastern section, which I think is the main concern moving forward. The main concern for that northeastern section is the fact that it is going to be fueled by those southwesterly wind gusts in the afternoon, which will continue to try to push that fire further to the northeast. And you can see that we have a large number of structures to the northeast right there. If we actually want to see what those cities are, you can see we have Susanville, Johnstonville, Janesville, and Buntingville up to the northeast of this fire. And again, that's my main concern because we're going to have mostly southwesterly winds in the afternoon, which will act to try to push this fire further towards the northeast. Now, the good news in this area is we do have the sheep fire burn scar from 2020, and you can already see how that's moderating some of the behavior on the Dixie Fire. Right when the Dixie Fire came up to the sheep fire, you can see that it basically stopped in its tracks. Two possible reasons for this. The sheep fire burned out a lot of the fuels in this area, so there's not as much material to continue that fire growth. And there's the possibility that they're reusing some of the containment lines from the sheep fire in 2020. But you can see how the Dixie Fire is just wrapping around that sheep fire now. Part of it, or half of it, going up to the north here where you see those hotspots. And the largest amount of activity has been on that northeastern section of the Dixie Fire that's starting to wrap around the sheep fire there. And looks to be about 8 to 10 miles away from Janesville as of right now, but I do believe there might be some new evacuation orders in that area. So if you live in that area, be sure to stay updated with all the most recent reports or orders put forward by your local resources. But again, that's the area I'm going to be watching the closest because you can see between the fire and Janesville, that sheep fire does not extend into that area, and that will continue to be fueled by those southwesterly winds. Now, where we have some good news on the fire, a number of days ago we had large amounts of hotspots. It looked like they were getting up to the southern area of Westwood and all the way to the east shore of Lake Almanor, but while we do still have some activity right there, you can see those hotspots, it seems to have calmed down compared to a few days ago. And I know CAL FIRE said they have a large amount of resources on that east shore of Lake Almanor and southern Westwood, working on structural protection and getting some good protective lines in those areas. Now, other areas that seem to have calmed down recently are the other locations around Lake Almanor, especially the Chester area, where you can see that the Dixie Fire basically surrounded that community, but didn't actually go through, and not many hotspots remaining right there. So just zooming back out, the areas where we'll see the most activity today will most likely be, I'll turn fire history and structures off for a second, will most likely be once again to the northern edge of the Dixie Fire and the northeastern edge as those southwesterly winds pick up in the afternoon. So when it comes to the numbers for the Dixie Fire, you can see that we're officially over 500,000 acres, 501,000 acres to be exact, which puts the Dixie Fire at the number 2 largest wildfire in the history of California, and the largest single fire in the history of California, as the August complex was where a number of fires all came together. So you can also see that containment has risen, which is surprising considering the challenging conditions we've had the last few days. It's up to 30% there. Like I said earlier, there's a large amount of evacuation orders in place, and those seem to be changing every day, so be sure to check the links in the description, especially if you live in this area, and those do keep changing every single day, so it is important to stay updated with those. Now, an unfortunate update over the last 24 hours is our structures destroyed is now up to 1,045, which I believe puts this at the 14th most destructive wildfire in the history of California. Now, if we actually want to see where the majority of those structures destroyed have come from, most of it is in the Canyon Dam area. You can see right here where you see those red houses, that means they're destroyed. The black houses is where there is no damage. So, large amount of damage in the Canyon Dam area, but most of the structures destroyed are from the Greenville area, where a number of nights ago the fire was able to rush through there, and you can see that a large number of structures, probably around 90%, have been destroyed. And if you actually, I put the link for this in the description, and you can actually go in and actually click on the photos to see what some of those structures look like in the area. So thoughts and prayers go out to everybody who has been affected by the Dixie Fire. It's been a long fight, and unfortunately, looking at the fire weather conditions, it looks like that fight will continue. But good news for us, we have a lot of resources for that fight. We have 20 helicopters, 502 engines, 197 dozers, 204 water tenders, over 6,000 personnel, and 68 crews, in some cases working around the clock to try to keep our structures and our lives safe. So the big question mark moving forward is going to be the fire weather forecast. So we'll look at all the different factors going on to try to make a prediction for what's going to happen to the Dixie Fire over the next couple of days. You can see the overall pattern that we've shifted to in the west. So this is very large ridge over really the entire western half of the U.S. There's a large portion of Washington and Oregon that are back into those excessive heat warnings. But what that means for California and what that means for our wildfires is that we're transitioning to hotter, drier conditions, but we're also transitioning to less windy conditions. When we had that low pressure system going through, that's when we had the red flag warning and some gusts up to 25, 35 miles per hour. Wind gusts the next couple days should just be around 10 to 20 miles per hour, but our temperatures will be up into the high 90s with relative humidity down into the low teens and single digits. To actually see a lot of that dry air that's over much of California, you can see that as that ridge has moved in, we've transitioned back to a more typical summer pattern for California where it's just hot and dry. But you do notice that there's a couple bursts of moisture throughout this map, and it's mostly upper level moisture. So at the surface, that's still going to allow a lot of fire activity to continue, as the surface relative humidity will just be in the low teens to single digits. But higher up in the atmosphere, we do have some bursts of moisture coming in, so that is creating the threat for some thunderstorms on Thursday and Friday. So just to look at all those conditions and exactly what the forecast is today, you can see our temperatures up into the mid to high 90s depending on where you are. Our humidity, like I said, very, very dry. The reason that's important is because the drier the air is, the drier the fuels are going to be, and especially those finer fuels. and the more likely and just the more that fire will like to spread. And then also the more likely it is that spot fires are able to start because of the dry fuels in the area. We've seen ignition rates of about 90 to 100% with some of those burning embers that fall into those exceptionally dry grasses. Now, where the good news comes in the fire weather forecast is while we still have those classic southwesterly winds coming in the afternoon of about 10 to 20 miles per hour, it's calmer than we've seen in previous days, and especially when we had that red flag over us where we had 35 mile per hour wind gusts. And it looks like this same pattern is going to be continuing for the next few days. Those wind gusts in the afternoon getting up to 10 to 20 miles per hour, temperatures getting up into the mid to high 90s, and relative humidity in the low teens to single digits. Now, the big question mark in the forecast is the possibility for those thunderstorms Thursday and Friday afternoon. So we'll go to Thursday at about 10 a.m. first, and then we'll click through here, and you can see how those thunderstorms are expected to go through the Dixie Fire area Thursday afternoon, then they calm down Thursday night, and then it looks like Friday afternoon, that potential for thunderstorms looks like it pops back up more north of the Dixie Fire, but we'll have to keep an eye as thunderstorms is one of the more difficult things for these models to forecast. Looks as of right now like Thursday has the higher potential for the Dixie Fire area to see some of those thunderstorms. And again, two sides to every coin on that one. And we've actually seen both sides of the coin on the Dixie Fire. The first round of thunderstorms that came in brought gusty erratic winds and even some lightning, and that really fanned the northern edge of our fire. But the second round of thunderstorms that came through just brought cloud cover, an increase in fuel moisture, and even some rain that helped our fire. So I'm certainly hoping that this round of thunderstorms, if it does come in, will be more like that second round we had where it was cloud cover and even some sprinkles. But as of right now, it's looking like a drier pattern than that second round. So looks like it's going to be more of that dry thunderstorm threat where we just have the winds and the possibility for some lightning. But again, big question marks right there, so we'll just have to keep an eye on that as we move forward. Just to summarize the fire weather forecast over the next 2 days, you can see in the afternoon hours, very, very challenging conditions when it comes to temperature and humidity, up into the mid to high 90s with relative humidity in the low teens. But where we're in better conditions than previous days is just expecting some wind gusts of about 10 to 15 miles per hour versus those 35 mile per hour wind gusts we've seen in the past. So more classic summer conditions for California, hot, dry with moderate wind gusts. So I think this basically summarizes everything I just said. For today, expect warmer temperatures and minimum RH in the low teens. Winds will be light and variable in the morning before shift to southwest in the afternoon with gusts around 10 to 15 miles per hour. Smoke cover will heavily moderate weather conditions, but significant instability will exist, bringing about rapid changes to areas that experience clearing. So that's another big question mark in the forecast today, is with all that smoke cover, we might actually get some great moderating effects as we have seen in the past. The last time we had this much smoke over Northern California, our forecast was about 92 degrees, and then it only ended up being about 72 degrees because that sunlight couldn't come through. But the question mark there is how much of that smoke is able to clear out throughout the day today. So that's another thing that we'll have to keep an eye on. And we can actually look at the air quality right now when it comes to that smoke over northwestern California, where we have the McFarland Fire, Monument Fire, and River Complex. You can see we're in that unhealthy to very unhealthy and even hazardous air. And there's a similar story for the Dixie Fire, which I would say isn't a huge surprise considering how much smoke you can see over Northern California right now. If we want to see the forecast for what that smoke is going to do throughout the day today, you can see that we have calmer winds than in the past. In the past, when we have those strong southerly winds, those winds have been, or that smoke has been being pushed directly up into Oregon and out of California. But with those weaker winds today, with that high pressure system that's sitting over us, you can see that that smoke is expected to sit over us as well. So poor air quality today, most likely won't be able to use as much aircraft on our fires. But like I said, we might get some moderating effects when it comes to how that smoke is able to keep our temperatures cooler, which would keep our winds calmer as well. But again, the key area that I'm going to be following throughout the day today is once again that northeastern section of the fire, which should be fueled by those southwesterly winds in the afternoon. And as you can see, if it continues to move farther to the northeast, that's where we could have some concerns in areas like Janesville. But again, the one piece of good news in that area is the sheep fire looks like it is having a great moderating effect on that fire growth already. So good news for areas like Susanville, as that sheep fire where a lot of those fuels have been burnt out is between you and the fire. So good thing to end on is when it comes to evacuation warnings, there are a large number of evacuation warnings in place. I purposely don't go over these throughout the course of these videos because I think it's better for you just to get it straight from the source. If there's middleman for that kind of information, it increases the probability for confusion or error. So you can find all the links in the description for all the evacuation warnings going on. And if I just had to summarize the Dixie Fire throughout the day today, again, we have the possibility for the moderating effects of that thick smoke that's over us right now. But if that smoke clears out, we have the potential for our temperatures to get up into the mid to high 90s, relative humidity in the low teens to single digits, which is challenging. But wind gusts should be more moderate, but they will be picking up from the southwest in the afternoon, seeing some gusts around 10 to 15 miles per hour. Now, the big question mark in the forecast moving forward is that thunderstorm possibility Thursday and Friday. So we'll just have to keep our eye on that to see how that might interact with the Dixie Fire. I'll be back later this afternoon for a more extended forecast and update on not only the Dixie Fire, but the McFarland Monument River Complex as well. And that will be a much more extended forecast so that we can actually follow it in real time at the most critical fire weather part of the day to see how those fires actually are changing as we get into this afternoon and this evening. So I hope this video is helpful. Thoughts and prayers go out to everyone who has been affected by these wildfires. Huge thank you to all the firefighters out there, and I hope you all have a good day. I'll see you this evening.